The old warehouse stood at the edge of town, where most people never bothered to go. Its windows were broken and covered with dirt. The walls had cracks running through them like spider webs. Nobody had used the building for years. Weeds grew tall around it, and the paint had peeled off long ago. But Sarah knew something that others did not. She had found the warehouse 3 weeks ago while riding her bicycle. At first, it looked like any other abandoned building. Then she saw the light. It was just a small glow coming from a window on the second floor. The light appeared every night at exactly 9 o'clock. Sarah was 12 years old and curious about everything. Her mother always said she asked too many questions. Her father said she would make a good detective someday. Sarah liked that idea. She kept a notebook where she wrote down interesting things she noticed. The light in the warehouse was now on page 15 of her notebook. She had drawn a picture of the building and marked the window with a red circle. She wrote down the time the light appeared each night. It never changed, always 9 o'clock. Tonight, Sarah decided to get closer. She told her parents she was going to her friend Emma's house. Emma knew about the warehouse and had agreed to cover for Sarah if needed. Emma thought the whole thing was exciting, but also a little scary. Sarah rode her bicycle through the quiet streets. The sun was setting, and the sky turned orange and pink. She reached the warehouse at 8:30. That gave her 30 minutes to find a good hiding spot. She left her bicycle behind some bushes near the road. Then she walked carefully toward the building. The ground was uneven and full of broken glass and old metal pieces. Sarah wore her sturdy boots and thick jeans. She had learned to be prepared. There was a large oak tree, about 20 feet from the warehouse. Sarah climbed up to a thick branch that gave her a clear view of the second-floor window. She settled in and waited. The evening air was cool, and she pulled her jacket tighter. At exactly 9 o'clock, the light appeared. It was yellowish and worn, like a candle or an old lamp. Sarah watched carefully. She could see shadows moving inside. Someone was definitely in there. Her heart beat faster. Who would be in an abandoned warehouse at night? Maybe someone homeless looking for shelter? But then why always at the same time? And why only that one room? The shadow moved across the window. It looked like a person standing still, then walking, then standing again. Sarah wished she could see more clearly. She took out her small binoculars from her backpack. Her grandfather had given them to her last birthday. Through the binoculars, things became clearer. She could see the room had walls with something hanging on them, maybe pictures or papers. There was definitely a person inside. They wore dark clothes and seemed to be looking at the walls. Sarah watched for 15 minutes. The person inside moved slowly around the room. Sometimes they stopped and seemed to write something. Other times they just stood and looked. Then suddenly the light went out. Complete darkness. Sarah waited to see if it would come back on. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. Nothing. The warehouse was dark and silent again. She climbed down from the tree and walked back to her bicycle. Her mind was racing with questions. What was that person doing? Why that specific time? What was in that room? When Sarah got home, her mother was reading in the living room. "How was Emma's house?" she asked. "Good," Sarah said. "We did homework together." She did not like lying to her mother, but she knew her parents would not let her investigate an old warehouse alone. They would say it was dangerous. They would be right, probably. But Sarah had to know the truth. In her room, Sarah opened her notebook. She wrote everything she had seen. The time the light appeared, the time it disappeared, the shadows, the things on the walls. She made a list of questions and possible answers. Maybe it was an artist, using the space as a studio. But why so secretly? Maybe it was someone hiding from something, or someone looking for something. Old warehouses sometimes had valuable things left behind. Sarah decided she needed to go inside. Looking from outside was not enough. She needed to see that room up close. But going inside an old building at night was truly dangerous. The floors could be weak, there could be holes or unsafe stairs. She would need a plan, and maybe she would need help. Emma was brave, but not very athletic. Sarah thought about other friends who might help. There was Marcus from school. He had helped her with other investigations before. Last year, they had figured out who was leaving mysterious notes in the school library. It turned out to be a shy student, trying to make friends by creating a treasure hunt. Marcus was good at solving puzzles and staying calm. Sarah sent Marcus a text message. "Need to talk to you about something interesting. Can you meet tomorrow after school?" Marcus replied quickly. "Sure. The usual spot?" The usual spot was the bench near the old fountain in the park. They had met there many times to discuss their various projects and investigations. Sarah felt better having a plan. Tomorrow she would tell Marcus about the warehouse. Together they would figure out how to safely explore it. Two people were smarter and safer than one. She looked out her bedroom window at the night sky. Somewhere across town, that warehouse stood in darkness. And inside, in that one room on the second floor, there were answers waiting to be found. Sarah smiled to herself. Her father was right. She would make a good detective. And this mystery was just beginning. The next day at school moved slowly for Sarah. She kept thinking about the warehouse and what she would tell Marcus. During math class, she barely heard what the teacher was saying. During lunch, Emma asked her 3 times if she was okay. "I'm fine," Sarah said, "just thinking about something." Emma leaned closer and whispered, "The warehouse thing?" Sarah nodded. "I'm telling Marcus about it today. We might need his help." Emma looked worried. "Be careful, okay? That building looks really old. What if the floors break or something falls on you?" "That's why I need Marcus," Sarah explained. "He knows about buildings. His uncle is a construction worker. Marcus has told me lots of stuff about how to tell if a structure is safe." Finally, school ended. Sarah grabbed her backpack and hurried to the park. Marcus was already sitting on the bench, eating an apple. He waved when he saw her. Marcus was tall for 13 and always wore a baseball cap. He had a calm way of looking at things that Sarah appreciated. Nothing seemed to make him panic. "So what's this interesting thing?" Marcus asked as Sarah sat down. Sarah told him everything. The warehouse, the light at 9 o'clock every night, the person moving around inside, the shadows on the walls. Marcus listened without interrupting. He finished his apple and threw the core into a nearby trash can. "That is interesting," he said. "You think someone is living there?" "Maybe," Sarah said, "but why only use one room? And why the same time every night? It feels like they're doing something specific." Marcus thought for a moment. Could be a lot of things. Could be someone's secret workspace. Could be someone who doesn't want to be found. Could even be something illegal. "You think we should tell someone? Like the police?" "Tell them what exactly?" Marcus asked. "That someone turns on a light in a building? That's not a crime. The building is abandoned, but people are allowed to be in abandoned buildings sometimes. Explorers do it all the time." He had a good point. They did not actually know if anything wrong was happening. "So what do you think we should do?" Sarah asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and typed something. "First, let's find out who owns the warehouse. That's public information. My dad showed me how to look it up on the county website." They spent 10 minutes searching online. The warehouse was owned by a company called Riverside Holdings. The property had been empty for 6 years. There were several unpaid tax notices. "Okay, so nobody's taking care of it," Marcus said. "That means our mystery person probably doesn't have permission to be there. But it also means the owner might not know someone is using it." "Should we go inside?" Sarah asked. "Tonight?" Marcus shook his head. "Not tonight. First, we should check it out during the day, see what condition it's in, find the safest way to enter. Then we can decide about going at night." Sarah felt a little disappointed, but knew Marcus was right. "Okay, when?" "Saturday morning, Marcus suggested. We can tell our parents we're going on a bike ride, which is true, technically. Sarah agreed. Saturday was 3 days away. She could wait that long. In the meantime, she would keep watching at night to see if anything changed. Over the next 2 evenings, Sarah returned to her spot in the oak tree. The light appeared at 9 o'clock both nights. The shadow person did the same things, walking around, stopping, looking at the walls, sometimes appearing to write something. On Friday night, something different happened. Sarah was watching through her binoculars when she saw the shadow person turn toward the window. For just a moment, she saw a face. It was a woman, maybe 30 or 40 years old. She had long dark hair pulled back. Her expression was serious, focused. Then the woman stepped away from the window, and Sarah could not see her anymore. But now the mystery felt more real. This was not just a shadow anymore. This was a real person with a real face. Sarah rode home thinking about the woman. Why was she there? What was she looking for or working on? The questions filled Sarah's mind. Saturday morning arrived bright and sunny. Sarah met Marcus at the park at 10 o'clock. They rode their bicycles toward the warehouse, taking a different route than Sarah usually used. Marcus wanted to see the building from all sides. They left their bikes hidden and walked around the warehouse's perimeter. Up close in daylight, the building looked even more run down. Some walls had holes in them. The roof sagged in places. Old pallets and broken equipment were scattered around. This place is pretty rough, Marcus said. We need to be really careful if we go inside. They found a door on the east side that was slightly open. Marcus pushed it wider, and they peered inside. The ground floor was one huge empty space. Concrete floor covered with dust and debris. Metal beams held up the ceiling. A staircase on the far wall led upward. The stairs look okay from here, Marcus observed, but we should test each step before putting our full weight on it. They entered slowly. The warehouse smelled musty and old. Their footsteps echoed in the empty space. Sarah felt both excited and nervous. They were really doing this. They approached the staircase. Marcus went first, testing each metal step carefully. Some creaked loudly, but held firm. Sarah followed close behind. The second floor was divided into several rooms. They walked down a hallway, with doors on both sides. Most doors were open, revealing empty rooms with damaged walls and broken windows. Which room had the light? Marcus asked. Sarah had counted the windows from outside. Third door on the left, I think. They reached the door. It was closed. Marcus looked at Sarah. Ready? She nodded. Marcus turned the handle and pushed. The doors swung open with a long creak. Inside, they both stopped and stared. The room was completely different from the others. The room was clean. That was the first shocking thing. While the rest of the warehouse was covered in dust and dirt and broken things, this room looked cared for. Someone had swept the floor. The window, though old, had been wiped clean from the inside. But what really made Sarah and Marcus stare were the walls. Every wall was covered with papers. Dozens and dozens of papers attached with tape and pins. The papers had writing on them, drawings, photographs, maps, and newspaper clippings. Whoa, Marcus whispered. They stepped inside carefully. Sarah felt like they had discovered a secret cave full of treasure, except the treasure was information instead of gold. One wall had a large map of their town. Red circles marked several locations. Lines connected the circles with notes written beside them. Sarah recognized some of the places: the old library, the train station, the park near the river, the museum downtown. Most were black and white and looked very old. They showed the town from many years ago. Buildings that no longer existed. Streets that looked completely different. People in old-fashioned clothing, standing in front of shops and houses. The third wall had newspaper clippings. Sarah moved closer to read them. The articles were about local history. One was about a fire that destroyed several buildings in 1923. Another told the story of a famous person who had lived in the town long ago. A third discussed an old tunnel system under the downtown area that had been sealed up. The fourth wall had papers covered in handwritten notes. The handwriting was neat and careful. Sarah read some of the notes. They were questions and observations about the town's history, about buildings that had disappeared, about streets that had changed names, about people who had been important but were now forgotten. In the corner of the room sat a small folding table and chair. On the table was a battery-powered lantern, several notebooks, pens, and a camera. So that explained the light Sarah had seen. It was not electricity, it was the lantern. Marcus walked slowly around the room, looking at everything. "This is someone's research project," he said. "Someone is investigating the history of our town." Sarah agreed. But why do it secretly in an abandoned warehouse? Why not do this research at home or at the library? "Look at this," Marcus said. He pointed to a large piece of paper in the center of the wall with the map. It had a title written in bold letters at the top: The Lost History of Millbrook. Millbrook was the name of their town. Under the title was a list of questions. What happened to the original town hall? Where did the underground tunnels go? Who was Elizabeth Cartwright, and why was her name removed from the records? What was the Riverside Company hiding in the 1890s? Where is the time capsule that was supposed to be opened in 2000? Sarah read the questions twice. They were mysterious and intriguing. Someone was not just interested in normal history. They were looking for hidden history. Stories that had been lost or covered up or forgotten. "This is like detective work," Sarah said, "but for the past instead of the present." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, this person is a history detective. Why work here at night?" That was the big question. Sarah looked at the papers again. Then she noticed something. Several of the newspaper clippings had notes written in the margins. Notes like, "Library says this article doesn't exist in their archives," and "Museum refused to answer questions about this," and "County records for this year are mysteriously missing." "Marcus, look," Sarah pointed at these notes. "I think this person is finding that some information is hard to get, maybe even being hidden on purpose." Marcus read the notes. His eyes got wider. "You think there's like a cover-up or something? About town history?" It sounded dramatic when he said it like that. But maybe it was true. Maybe someone had hidden parts of the town's history, and maybe the woman in the warehouse was trying to uncover the truth. Suddenly they heard a sound from downstairs. Someone was entering the warehouse. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other with wide eyes. They had been so focused on the room that they had not been paying attention. Now someone was coming, probably the woman who worked in this room. "Quick," Marcus whispered. "We need to hide." But where? The room was small and mostly empty, except for the table and papers on the walls. There was a closet in the corner with its door half open. They rushed over to it. Inside was barely enough space for both of them, but they squeezed in and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a crack to see through. The footsteps came up the stairs. They sounded calm and steady, not hurried. The person walked down the hallway. The footsteps stopped outside the room. The door opened. The woman walked in. Sarah could see her clearly now through the crack in the closet door. She was the same woman Sarah had glimpsed through the window. Long, dark hair, serious face, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. She carried a backpack and a cup of coffee. The woman set her coffee on the table and took off her backpack. She did not seem to notice anything wrong. She pulled out a notebook from her backpack and opened it. Then she stood in front of the wall with the map and studied it while sipping her coffee. Sarah barely breathed. Her heart pounded so loud she worried the woman might hear it. Next to her, Marcus was completely still. The woman wrote something in her notebook. She moved to the wall with the photographs and examined them closely. She seemed to be looking for something specific. After about 5 minutes, she spoke out loud to herself. There has to be a connection between the tunnel system and the missing records. They closed the tunnels right when the records disappeared. That can't be coincidence. She walked back to the map and traced her finger along some of the red circles. The library, the old courthouse, the museum, all built around the same time, all located above where the tunnels used to run. Sarah listened carefully. The woman was definitely investigating something. Something about tunnels under the town and missing historical records. The woman checked her watch. "Only have an hour today," she muttered. She sat at the table and began writing in her notebook, referring to the papers on the walls. Sarah's legs were starting to cramp from standing still in the small closet. She shifted slightly, and her shoe made a tiny scraping sound. The woman's head snapped up. She looked around the room. "Hello?" she called out. "Is someone there?" Sarah held her breath. "Please don't open the closet," she thought. The woman stood up and looked around more carefully. She walked toward the closet. Sarah's mind raced. In about 3 seconds, the woman would open the closet door and find them. They could not run. There was no back way out of the closet. They were trapped. But then the woman's phone rang. She stopped and pulled it from her pocket. "Hello?" she answered. She listened for a moment. "Now? I'm in the middle of something. Can it wait?" Another pause. Okay, I'll be there in 20 minutes. She ended the call and looked frustrated. She glanced once more around the room, shook her head, and began packing her notebook back into her backpack. Probably just the building settling, she said to herself. She took her coffee cup, her backpack, and the lantern. She gave the room one last look, then left. Her footsteps went down the hall, down the stairs, and eventually faded away. Sarah and Marcus stayed frozen for another full minute. Then Marcus slowly pushed open the closet door. They both tumbled out, gasping. "That was way too close," Marcus said. Sarah agreed. Her heart was still racing. "We should leave before she comes back." They hurried out of the room and down the stairs. They did not run because they did not want to make too much noise, but they moved quickly. Outside, they grabbed their bicycles and rode away from the warehouse. They did not stop until they reached the park. They sat on their usual bench, both breathing hard. "Okay," Marcus said after he caught his breath. "That was intense, but we learned a lot." Sarah nodded. She pulled out her notebook and began writing down everything they had seen. The walls covered with research, the questions about lost history, the woman talking about tunnels and missing records. "She's investigating something real," Sarah said. "Did you hear what she said? About tunnels under the town and records that disappeared?" Marcus leaned back on the bench. "I've heard stories about tunnels downtown. My grandfather mentioned them once. He said when he was a kid, there were entrances to old tunnels, but they got sealed up by the city." "Why would they seal them?" Sarah asked. "Safety, probably," Marcus said. "Old tunnels can collapse. But maybe there was another reason." They sat thinking. Sarah looked at her notes. The woman had mentioned several locations: the library, the old courthouse, the museum, all built above where the tunnels used to be. "We should try to find out more about these tunnels," Sarah said. "Maybe we can help her investigation." Marcus looked uncertain. "Should we help? We don't even know who she is or what she's really looking for." Sarah thought about this. She's looking for truth. That's what all those questions were about. Things that got forgotten or hidden. "I think that's important. But maybe things were hidden for good reasons," Marcus pointed out. That was possible, but Sarah did not think so. The woman seemed serious and careful. Not like someone looking to cause trouble. More like someone who genuinely wanted to understand the town's real history. "Let's do some research on our own," Sarah suggested. "We can go to the library, look up information about the tunnels, see what we can find. Then we can decide what to do." Marcus agreed. They made plans to meet at the library on Monday after school. The rest of the weekend, Sarah could not stop thinking about what they had discovered. She looked up Millbrook tunnels on the internet, but found very little information. Just a few brief mentions in old articles. Nothing detailed. She also thought about the name the woman had written on her research, Elizabeth Cartwright. Who was she? And why had her name been removed from records? Monday afternoon, Sarah and Marcus met at the Millbrook Public Library. The library was an old stone building in the center of town. It had been there for over 100 years. They went to the reference section and asked the librarian, Mrs. Chen, for help. Mrs. Chen was elderly and had worked at the library for decades. If anyone knew about the town's history, it would be her. "We're doing a school project about local history," Sarah explained. This was not entirely a lie. They were investigating local history, even if it was not for school. "We wanted to learn about the old tunnel system that used to be under downtown." Mrs. Chen's friendly expression changed slightly. She looked uncomfortable. "The tunnels? Well, there's not much information about those. They were sealed up long ago." "But why were they built?" Marcus asked. "And why were they sealed?" "They were built in the late 1800s. The town was growing, and they needed better ways to move supplies between buildings, but they became dangerous, so the city closed them in the 1920s. "Are there any maps of the tunnels?" Sarah asked. "Or records about them?" "I don't believe so," Mrs. Chen said quickly. "Those records are very old, probably lost." But Sarah noticed something in Mrs. Chen's expression. She was not telling the whole truth, or at least, she was not telling everything she knew. "What about Elizabeth Cartwright?" Sarah asked. "We saw her name mentioned in an old article. Who was she?" Mrs. Chen's face went pale. "Where did you see that name?" Sarah thought fast. "In an old newspaper article online, but we couldn't find much information about her." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned closer and spoke softly. "Elizabeth Cartwright is not someone you should be researching for a school project. Leave that topic alone." "But why?" Marcus asked. Mrs. Chen shook her head. "It's old business, complicated business. Nothing for young people to worry about." She stood up. "Now I have work to do. You two should focus on safer topics for your project." She walked away quickly, leaving Sarah and Marcus at the table. "That was weird," Marcus said. "She definitely knows something but won't tell us." Sarah agreed. Mrs. Chen's reaction made everything more mysterious. Why would a librarian tell students not to research something? Libraries were supposed to be about finding information, not hiding it. They spent another hour searching through old newspapers and town records on the library computers. They found a few small mentions of the tunnels, but nothing detailed. It was as if information had been deliberately removed or hidden. As they were leaving, Sarah noticed something. On a wall near the exit was a series of old photographs showing the library through its history. One photograph, from 1915, showed the library's opening day. A group of people stood on the front steps. Sarah looked closely at the photograph. In the back row, slightly blurred, was a woman in a dark dress. Under the photograph, names were listed for the people in the front row, but the back row had no names. Sarah pulled out her phone and took a picture of the photograph. She had a feeling that unnamed woman might be important. That evening, Sarah sat at her desk studying the photograph she had taken. She zoomed in on the woman in the back row. The image was blurry, but the woman looked proud and serious. She wore a high-collared dress typical of that time period. Sarah wondered if this could be Elizabeth Cartwright. There was no way to know for sure, but something about the way Mrs. Chen had reacted made Sarah think Elizabeth had been someone important who had been deliberately erased from history. She opened her notebook and made a list of what they knew. Tunnels existed under downtown Millbrook in the late 1800s. The tunnels were sealed in the 1920s. Records about the tunnels are missing or hard to find. Elizabeth Cartwright was someone important, whose name was removed from records. The library, old courthouse and museum were all built above where tunnels used to run. Someone is investigating all of this secretly. Sarah added a question. Why is the mysterious woman doing her research in secret instead of openly? She thought about Mrs. Chen's reaction. The librarian had seemed nervous or even scared when they asked about Elizabeth Cartwright. Maybe the woman in the warehouse was working secretly because people did not want this history uncovered. But why? What could be so important about events from over 100 years ago? Sarah decided she needed to talk to the woman, not by surprising her or hiding from her, but openly. Maybe if Sarah explained that she wanted to help, the woman would share information. She texted Marcus, "I think we should talk to the warehouse woman. Tell her we know what she's researching and want to help." Marcus replied, "Are you sure? What if she gets mad that we were in her space?" Sarah wrote back, "She'll probably be mad at first, but I think she needs help, and we need answers. Want to go tomorrow after school?" "Okay, but if this goes badly, I'm blaming you." Sarah smiled. Marcus liked to joke, but she knew he was curious too. The next day after school, they rode to the warehouse. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, still daylight. They did not know if the woman would be there, but they decided to check. They knocked on the door they had used before. No answer. They went inside and up the stairs. The door to the research room was closed. Sarah knocked on it. No response. "Maybe she only comes at night," Marcus said. Sarah was disappointed. She had worked up her courage to have this conversation. Now, they would have to wait. They were about to leave when they heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone was coming up. Sarah and Marcus stood in the hallway, not sure what to do. The woman appeared at the top of the stairs. She saw them and stopped. For a moment everyone was frozen. Then the woman spoke. Her voice was firm, but not angry. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Sarah took a breath. "My name is Sarah. This is Marcus. We've seen your research room. We know you're investigating the town's hidden history. We want to help." The woman studied them carefully. "How old are you?" 12, Sarah said. "He's 13. "You're children," the woman said. "You shouldn't be here. This building isn't safe." "We were careful," Marcus said. "We know about building safety." The woman walked closer. She did not seem angry, but she did not seem happy either. "You've been in my research room? Did you touch anything?" "No," Sarah said quickly. "We just looked. We saw your questions about Elizabeth Cartwright and the tunnels. We went to the library to research too, but Mrs. Chen, the librarian, she wouldn't tell us anything. She seemed scared when we asked about Elizabeth Cartwright." Something changed in the woman's expression. "Mrs. Chen knows something then. I thought she might." She looked at Sarah and Marcus again. "You went to the library and asked questions?" "Yes," Sarah said. "We're interested in real history, not just the normal stories everyone knows. The hidden stories." The woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Come with me." She led them to the research room and gestured for them to sit on the floor since there was only one chair. She sat in the chair and looked at them seriously. "My name is Dr. Rebecca Torres," she said. "I'm a historian. I specialize in uncovering suppressed local histories. I came to Millbrook 3 months ago because I found references to something unusual. A prominent woman named Elizabeth Cartwright, who seemed to disappear from all records after 1915. "Who was she?" Sarah asked. "That's what I'm trying to find out," Dr. Torres said. "From what little information exists, she was a wealthy woman who funded many important buildings in this town. The library, the hospital, several schools. But after 1915, her name vanishes. Buildings she paid for don't mention her. It's as if someone wanted to erase her from history." "But why?" Marcus asked. Dr. Torres stood and walked to the wall with the map. I believe it has to do with what she discovered in the tunnels. Elizabeth owned the company that built the tunnel system. The tunnels were used to transport goods, but I think they were also used for something else. Something people wanted to keep secret. What kind of secret? Sarah asked. I don't know yet, Dr. Torres admitted. But I know that important records went missing right after the tunnels were sealed. And anyone who tries to research this seriously faces resistance. That's why I work here at night, in secret. People in positions of authority in this town don't want this history revealed. Sarah thought about Mrs. Chen's reaction. Dr. Torres was right. Someone was trying to keep this hidden. How can we help? Sarah asked. Dr. Torres smiled for the first time. You already have helped. Chen reacted to Elizabeth's name. That confirms people still know about this. They're still protecting whatever secret exists. She looked at the two young people. But I need to be clear. This could be dangerous. Not physically dangerous, but complicated. If powerful people want history to stay buried, they won't be happy about children asking questions. We understand, Marcus said, but we want to help anyway. Dr. Torres nodded slowly. Okay, here's what we'll do. You two can research in places I can't easily go. School archives, talk to elderly relatives. Children asking questions seems innocent. I'll continue my work here. We'll share what we learn. She gave them her phone number. Text me what you discover. And be careful. If anyone seems upset by your questions, back off. Safety first. Sarah and Marcus agreed. As they left the warehouse that afternoon, Sarah felt excited. They were part of a real investigation now. They were going to help uncover a hidden piece of their town's history. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah and Marcus became history detectives. They talked to grandparents and great-grandparents. They searched old yearbooks and newspaper archives. They visited the Historical Society. Slowly, piece by piece, a story began to emerge. Elizabeth Cartwright had been a remarkable woman. She had inherited money and used it to help the town grow. But she had also been brave. Too brave, perhaps. In 1915, she had discovered that town officials were using the tunnels for illegal activities. They were hiding stolen goods and important documents down there. When Elizabeth threatened to expose them, they destroyed her reputation and erased her from history. The tunnels had been sealed not for safety, but to hide evidence. And for over 100 years, the secret had been kept. When Dr. Torres heard all the evidence, she smiled. You two are excellent researchers. Together, we have enough to tell Elizabeth's true story. She published an article revealing everything. It caused quite a stir in Millbrook. Some people were angry, but many others were glad the truth finally came out. The library put up a new plaque honoring Elizabeth Cartwright's contributions. Sarah learned something important from the experience. History matters. Hidden stories deserve to be told, and sometimes it takes curious young people asking questions to bring truth into the light.